This is Shack Talk, presented by Eskimo Ice Fishing Gear and hosted by Kyle Agre and Anthony Kleinwachter. Turn up your speakers, grab your gear, and hit the ice with us as we talk ice fishing. Come on in and grab a bucket. We are talking ice fishing. Kyle Agre and Anthony Kleinwachter, and we are here for season 7 of Shack Talk Ice Fishing Podcast. Anthony, hard to believe Shack Talk has been around for 7 seasons. It's pretty exciting though to see that we've got an established track record and we've got a pretty fun jumping off place for a new season.
Yeah, it's always exciting getting back into the recording studio, aka our offices, and getting on a little podcast, talking ice fishing. Things are kind of getting into that point where people are starting to, ice fishing's creeping into the back of their mind. I know a lot of people are thinking about hunting right now, but in a couple of weeks, I mean, we could have below freezing temperatures. We could have some ice forming on those lakes and ponds, and before you know it, we'll be scurrying out there.
Well, absolutely. And I don't know about you. Well, I do know about you because I do know that you love this time of the year about as much as I do. And so many people who love the outdoors. It's spent the last couple of weeks of October and first couple of weeks of November, right? It's getting in on that really hot fall fishing bite. It's getting out into the duck slough. It's getting out in the field chasing pheasants. It's getting in the tree stand to wait for that big buck to come around. And, typically there's not enough days to do everything you want to do, right? There's always this kind of urgency to get out and just capture this time of the year. But in the background, there's this thought of where are we going next, right? And like you said, we could be days away from freezing temperatures where bodies of water are going to start to skim over. And, from there, it just snowballs up. And gosh, I love this time of the year. I just wish I could capture it in a bottle and save it and take it back out later and all the excitement, all the anticipation and all the getting ready. It's here right now. We're doing it.
Yeah. And especially on a year like this year where the weather has been, a little bit unseasonably warm. We've had some really nice days, and as much as we'd love that to continue on, it's going to make that gap between where it goes from warm to cold really short. And then all of that scrambling to get ice gear ready and everything else is going to happen in a matter of time. And I'm just hoping that I'm ready for it.
Yeah. And me too. I'm right there with you. We had a 14 degrees here a couple of weeks ago or a week and a half ago. That came on us really quick. And there's nothing saying that kind of weather can't come back in the blink of an eye. And yeah, we want to enjoy the nice fall weather we've got now, but gosh, I'm ready for some ice. I'm ready to get out there, drill some holes, chase some fish, and do what we love to do. And one of the things we love to do is talk ice fishing, right? Here we are, Shack Talk Ice Fishing Podcast. And I don't know, it's just you and I tonight, Anthony. We thought we'd kick the season off here with just you and I. Just maybe run a little introduction here for those who maybe aren't familiar with Shack Talk Ice Fishing Podcast, a little bit about who each of us are, who we are, and maybe do a little look back on last year, some of the memories we created, lessons learned, or whatever. And then we'll look forward to this year and what we've anticipating. And we'll even let you in on a few of the things we've got planned for the upcoming season.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. And as you mentioned, to kick things off, we're on season 7. There are 6 past seasons of great episodes. We've had a ton of great guests. We've been, I think we've mentioned it before, selfish on some of the guests that we've had and sat back and listened to them and take in all the knowledge that they're willing to share. So if you haven't and you're new to the podcast, go back, listen to those episodes. A lot of great guests that we've had on, and we look forward to hopefully having a few of those guests on in the upcoming season.
Absolutely. Hey, Anthony, let's just start. Jump right in. Tell us who you are. Give us the 1-minute history of Anthony Kleinwachter and what brought you to Shack Talk. And just give our listeners a little bit of a picture of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in West Fargo, along with Kyle in the Fargo-Moorhead area. I've been a part of the Eskimo team for a handful of years now. I was also part of the Fish Addictions crew, ran around on the ice with those guys, chasing those crazy bites and having a lot of fun with them. And I was honored to be asked to be part of Shack Talk podcast, and, been on the show here now for 3 seasons. And so it's been a lot of fun having that time to get to know Kyle and the guests that we've had. And honestly, it's been kind of a blur. I mean, it's crazy to think about, how fast things have flown by. And honestly, it's just a matter of, living where we live. It's chasing that next bite, whether it's an hour into North Dakota, an hour into Minnesota, or an hour south down to South Dakota, or a couple hours north of the border. I mean, it's a matter of, we're kind of in that epicenter of ice fishing where we kind of have the opportunity to run wherever we need to run. So it's pretty fun.
It is really fun, and it has been a privilege and honor, and a whole lot of fun getting to know you too, Anthony, and both in the podcast and out. We've shared a few days on the ice, and that's always a fun way to just hang out and relax and just get to know guys and gals, and we all know that's what we love to do, right? It's a whole lot of fun. I have similarly to you, Anthony, I've grown up in the outdoors. It was part of my life from as far back as I can remember. More of my involvement in the outdoor industry here came about after my 2 kids, two children, a daughter and a son. Once they were out of high school, and I wasn't spending multiple nights every week sitting in the bleachers in school watching sporting events and theater events and concerts and this, that, and the other thing. I was able to use some of that extra free time to get involved in things. I've been affiliated with Eskimo and Ion and their brand and the organizations in that incredible company or companies for about a decade. And part of that came Shack Talk. And I have had the privilege of being here for all of the 6 previous seasons and now going into season 7. I also host an outdoor radio show here in Fargo on KFGO and in Sioux Falls, South Dakota on KWSN called Gone Outdoors. And so that brings me more opportunity to talk about the things that I love to do in the outdoors.
Yeah, it's been great. And like you mentioned, a lot of your time has came after you've had kids and activities. Mine is just creeping into that. My kids are both younger, and I still have a little bit of opportunity and time to run. They're not super busy into sports and band and choir and all of that stuff quite yet. So I think you maybe foreshadowed a little bit of what I have to look forward to.
Yep, but it's all good, man. It's all good stuff. You got to take in everything that life gives you at whatever stage you're at, right? And sometimes that's more ice fishing, sometimes it's a little bit less, but you trade it off for some other good things too. And it's all good when it's in the mix there. Hey, before we jump in with both feet into season 7, and before we get going in a cloud of dust here, Anthony, let's look back at last year. Let's talk about 21-22. Let's look at it this way. What were some of the highlights of last year's ice season, and perhaps maybe take it away with a lesson learned or something you discovered you didn't know before?
Yeah, absolutely. Last year, I think probably the biggest takeaway for me last year was the weather. It impacted so many weekends, so many different fishing trips. I think the Fargo-Moorhead area had 11 or 12 blizzards, and it seemed like they happened to fall on the weekend every single time, whether it was impacting a Thursday, Friday, or Friday, Saturday, or Saturday, Sunday, Sunday, Monday. It never seemed to fail. And so that really kind of impacted, how we were planning our trips, where we were going. Didn't venture too far other than, one trip, which I, would probably call the highlight of the season. It was one of the first trips that we took in January, and that was out to Fort Peck, Montana. I know we talked about it last season. I think we had Jim on the podcast and talked about that. I know he enjoyed it as well. And we went out there with the Fish Addictions crew, and we had been out there in the boat in the summertime, and, having that kind of little bit of knowledge and excitement for the ice season. We had a little bit of expectations going into the trip, but the way that the weather played out, we had good weather. We were out there the whole time. We had fairly good ice conditions. We obviously had to be careful when we were out there. That's a big body of water. But it was just so much fun. The amount of fish that we caught, the camaraderie that we shared. We did some ice camping. Well, we camped in ice shacks on shore. And all of that combined was just one of those highlight trips that you have. And, something that I'll look back on a memory for years and years to come.
That sounds like a whole lot of fun. Any lessons learned? Anything you took away from the ice season last year that you maybe weren't aware of before?
Yeah, I would say just, kind of even touching back on the weather is just, being able to plan and be flexible. And, you mentioned it with having kids is, there's going to be seasons where you don't get out as much as you would like to. And there's going to be seasons where you probably get out a lot more than you should have. And you might have to pay for that afterwards. But, last year I'm hoping was one of those seasons where I spent a few more, weekend trips, less weekend trips, more day trips, just trying to sneak out when a guy could and a little more time at home. But hopefully we'll have some better weather this year and can maybe sneak in a few more of those extended trips to some of those destinations we love to get to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's always the excitement of looking ahead and knowing there were things on your list last year you didn't get done, right? You didn't get to go to, you didn't get to accomplish, and knowing that those are ahead of you is pretty awesome. I think about last ice season, and you reminded me when you said the weather, right? Who can forget the weather last year? I mean, we had you're right, storm after storm after storm, lots of snow, which in our area we needed, and I guess that was a good thing, but it made ice fishing a little bit treacherous. One of the highlights kind of goes along with some of that weather. The border opened back up, and we made our first ice fishing trip to Lake Winnipeg and Manitoba since prior to the pandemic. And that was a huge highlight. Absolutely a huge highlight. Now, the weather was the other side of the coin on that trip because essentially we barely left the cabin. We were in a 3.5 day blizzard, and we were cabin bound the first day for sure. The following 2 days, we made it out onto the ice, but really could only venture about a mile and a half out from the cabin due to some just extremely windy and snowy conditions, blizzard, whiteout conditions. We did get a chance to catch some fish while we were out there, but it wasn't necessarily the experience we were hoping for. So yeah, this year we'll get back up there and do it, maybe do it upright. A couple of the other highlights, having the ability and the opportunity to take my grandson out fishing for the first time. Rented a house, a Hard Out Wheelhouse from Randon Olson, one of our pro team members here and good friend of ours. And we were able to get him out and spend an overnight on the ice to catch some bluegills and some small pike. And just seeing the excitement in those young kids' eyes. He's 5 years old, and just to have that experience was super cool. And along the same lines of those Hard House fishing experiences, you and I get to do Shack Talk from one of Randon's wheelhouses as well last year. That was definitely a highlight. Lesson learned. Here's my lesson learned. My son, Tony, he kind of pushed me into this. He said, "Dad, you got to buy a jet boil. You got to buy a jet boil and have it for ice fishing." Yeah. I got enough trinkets and stuff that I carry around that I didn't necessarily need it. I tell you what, that's a game changer. That is a game. Do you have one?
I don't. I mean, I've done plenty of cooking on the Mr. Heaters and everything, and I know guys that are carrying those jet boils around, and it definitely seems interesting. I know a lot of guys that can't go a day ice fishing without their coffee, and for those guys, it's a must-have. I am not the coffee drinker, so those guys are the ones bringing it along. I love to cook on the ice, so I can definitely see myself using it, but usually I'm just more using what I have on the ice, whether it's a heater or some type of propane heater or grill that I bring along. But yeah, no, I definitely have seen them in use and definitely think they're a pretty neat accessory to bring with you on the ice.
Definitely an accessory. And coffee is completely it. That's for me. I got to have my coffee when I'm out there. And so for me, being able to boil up some hot coffee while I'm on the ice is huge. And then do some of those, dehydrated meals. I love getting together with friends out on the ice and cooking up some brats or hot dogs or whatever it might be. Right. Doing a little fish fry out there. That's so much fun. But those days when you're by yourself, or maybe you're in that group and you're mobile and you're kind of really focused on the fishing more than the socialization of it, being able to boil up some water and throw those dehydrated meals on and eat kind of on the go, really cool. That was a game changer for me. That was my lesson learned for last ice season. So for all of you that are listening, you've got my endorsement on that one.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about it before. A warm meal out on the ice really can change your day. It, re-energizes you for the, maybe the evening bite or something. Whereas a cold sandwich is kind of just like, well, I guess I need to eat something because, it's there. But yeah, a warm meal definitely is something on my list when I'm going out ice fishing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a good year. Last year was a great year after, the prior year being all the pandemic stuff. And here we were at Shack Talk. If you go back a couple seasons ago, talking about social fish distancing and, just all of those things that we're not having to hear every day anymore. Last year was a great season, and I am just looking forward to this next season coming up with a lot of anticipation.
Yeah, I'm really excited for, what's to come. And like you mentioned, the border opened up last year. It's pretty much restriction free this year. So really looking forward to getting back up there myself. I'm sure a lot of people are as well. And I'm hoping that, there'll be more venturing on some of those destination trips.
Yeah, I'm certain people will. And just as we get back to feeling a little bit more normal, which we've come a long ways in doing that already. So definitely. Hey, Anthony, let's talk about what we've got coming up in the season ahead, because, that excitement really, you start to feel it even late summer, right? And you see online some of the Facebook pages, some of the forums, some of the places where people chat and share information. And there's chatter already in, August as to what are the new products coming out in the ice fishing world. What are the improvements? What are the, yada, yada, yada. And then that leads to people talking about, where's my trip going to be this year? Where's my destination going to be? And so let's just jump into that one. Let's jump into that one and talk a little bit about maybe some new things coming out for this upcoming season that we didn't have the opportunity to use last year.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked, about those releases in, late fall. Most of the major brands are starting to drop their ice fishing stuff. It seems like that end of September or end of August, early September. And so that's when the hype really starts. And I know both you and I are wearing some new apparel from Eskimo. So I'm excited for that. Really excited for the Eskimo brand and seeing that apparel line really expand the past few years, from the evolution of their different suits to new and improved gloves and everything else that they have. It's really fun to be able to be comfortable out on the ice and, have some functional clothing, as well as, we'll give Sarah a little credit, some fashionable stuff. It doesn't look too bad on us when we're, at the end of the day wanting to go in and maybe grab a meal or a beverage at an establishment. You're not just walking in there with your, jeans or Carhartts on. It's nothing wrong with those things, but it's nice to be able to be comfortable and have some of that functionality out on the ice.
You're right. And that's probably a topic we're going to hit some point during the season, Anthony. But if you look at the outdoors and you look at where apparel and the technology side of apparel has come, specifically in the hunting, I think hunting really has been, they've revolutionized what apparel is and what clothing is as gear. And, we're seeing that follow when we talk about both open water and ice. And certainly I think ice is more evident because it's just come such a long way from the coveralls or the, whatever it is. You dig the old deer hunting coveralls out of the bin or the back closet. And, that's when we were young, that's what it was.
Yeah, I've learned so much about, what specs go into clothing. I know we've had these conversations before, but, waterproofing and thread counts and different things and how that all affects, whether your bibs are getting iced up when you're drilling holes or whether the wind's cutting through your clothing when you're out on the ice, and all those different things that, maybe I wasn't as knowledgeable in the past. I think consumers, they have all that information readily available. I know we continue to put out content and information pieces on what to look for when you're buying those clothing pieces. And I think, layering has become a bigger thing, and making sure that you have some of those layering pieces. And I know myself, I don't think I'll ever go back to wearing blue jeans under my ice bibs ever again. Ever since we got the Shack pants from Eskimo, sweatpants, that's the way to go.
It is the way to go. And they've actually upped that game even this year again. And you look at the North Shore lineup, the North Shore pants, North Shore vest, and they're not just sweatpants, are they? They're very much suited for an underlayer under your ice suit, but they're extremely comfortable. You can wear them almost every day. You can wear them out to the pub after you've been on the ice all day. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it continues to grow, it continues to change, it continues to evolve, which is really exciting.
Yeah, a lot of great things coming out this year, and I'm sure years to come. I know the gloves; those are always one of those hot topic items on what improvements are out there, and finding the right gloves to wear that are both functional and warm. And the same goes for all the other apparel pieces when you're out on the ice, because that's really what it boils down to: is being comfortable, but also being able to function when you're out on the ice.
And you mentioned this earlier, Anthony, don't forget about looking good, because
Looking good too.
it's one of the favorite things. You're wearing a new performance hoodie. I've got the new hockey hoodie. Eskimos kind of went through the like every year they have a new design for their hockey hoodie. So we sit and we're like anxious to find out what it's going to be. And this is this is absolutely my favorite to date.
Yeah, absolutely. The hockey hoodie's got that plaid in there, and I know last year the Kenora dinner jacket was a favorite of many, myself included. I wear mine almost every day. It's so easy to just throw on, and it's a nice apparel piece to have in the arsenal. But yeah, a lot of great options out there, and hopefully people are enjoying them as much as we are, and hopefully we're not shamelessly plugging them just because we enjoy it. But I know a lot of the consumers at the shows and feedback that we get from people on the ice as well is they're impressed with what Eskimo's coming out with, and that's what we like to hear.
Yeah, most definitely. And we'll touch on maybe some more stuff auger wise and shack wise, but let's just talk about this upcoming season. Anthony, for you personally, do you have any destination trips already booked, like already in the works, where you're going to be on XYZ lake at a certain date?
Nothing specific. Got a few ideas penciled in. I know, as I mentioned before, and you mentioned it too, Lake Winnipeg is definitely on my to-do list this winter. Having not made it up there for a couple of years, that's probably number one on the priority list. Whether I go up there in February or March, or not sure on the exact destination or exact calendar dates, but it'll be fun to get back up there. And wanting to get back out into kind of that prairie pothole region in North Dakota. Last year with all the storms and wind, that definitely wasn't the direction that I headed. As much as if anybody's in the area knows how often I-94 gets shut down from Jamestown to Fargo, I wasn't about to get stuck out there for 3-4 days. So looking forward to getting back out there and chasing some of those, giant slough perch that North Dakota is known for.
Yeah, no kidding. You guys had some really good times out there a couple of years ago, and I'm sure you'll be chasing that bite again this year. For me, not to rub it in, Anthony, but I just got back from Lake Winnipeg here. I was up there in Pine Falls, Manitoba about a week and a half ago. And yes, it's definitely worth it. Definitely worth going back. And I can't wait to get back up there on the hard water, which is, it's a little ways out here for me personally. It'll be after the first of the year, but just super exciting to catch those greenbacks, and not just greenbacks, but to catch up with all our buddies and friends up there that we've made. Great people up in the province of Manitoba. And so lots of fun. I'm definitely, we've already got a trip booked and planned, one trip for sure. And it's likely going to turn into multiple trips. Another trip that I've got on the books already was after last year, thanks to you, thanks to Mike, the Fish Addictions guys, that Lake of the Woods spring, March tip up fishing for big pike. Holy smokes, where has that been my whole life?
Yeah, it's a great time. And I know we've talked about it several times since then. It's just, a lot of the trips we focus on fishing, where the pike fishing, you throw the tip ups out. It's much more of a leisure, have conversations, cook some food. Oh, there's a flag, go out and catch it. And, you can have those days where we've been up there and it's, a flag every 15, 20 minutes. And it is become a marathon where you're catching, 15, 20, 25 pike in a day. It can be a lot more exciting, but I know we kind of hit it and it was a little bit slower, but it was still fun. And you never know when that flag goes up, if it's a, 20, 30 inch pike, or if it's the pike of a lifetime. And, there's a lot of that caliber fish swimming up there.
Well, I tell you what, we had fun hanging out with you for a day. We had fun hanging out within our group for a day after that when you guys went home. And here was a realization that I came to. Those pike that are being targeted up there at that time of the year and in that type of technique, they are not your little hammer handle slimers. This is a different caliber fish. And we didn't catch a whole lot of them, but the ones we caught were totally hand-to-hand combat, big fish, strong, exciting runs. And I mean, it was just like, whether you were on the, on the handle end of the rod and reel, or pulling the tip up with the string, or whether you were one of the three of us standing around trying to help or wait or just anticipating what that fish was coming up.
Yeah, it's definitely a team effort. If you're using tip ups, you got to have somebody kind of managing the line and making sure that that's free if that pike does take off on a run, which they more than likely will do. And if you're going hand-to-hand combat, those fish can turn on a dime and they start running at you and they think that they're gone. Or if you're using a rod and reel, I mean, they can peel out drag in a minute. I know you mentioned that your son Tony, set the hook on one with a rod and reel and just kind of looked over and was just like, "Oh, this is real. Like, this isn't a little fish."
Yeah, he not to put him on the spot, but he showed up with his Lake Winnipeg gear, thinking 8-pound test mono and medium to medium heavy rod. We're gonna be good to go, right? And like, no, you might just put those aside. And based on what Anthony has told me, this is we need a little bit heavier gear. And he's like, okay, well, whatever. I don't know this game. I'm learning. And yeah, the first fish he set the hook on, he's fighting this fish and he looks up at me like, whoa, this is real.
Yeah, and it's not even just the power of the fish, because I mean, I'm sure we've all caught a 40-inch pike on 8-pound test, but the violent runs and the deteriorating ice can rub on that line and break it pretty easy. So it is something where you kind of have to up the game and make sure that you have the correct gear for that specific species that you're targeting.
Well, come late March, Anthony, you can bet your bottom dollar where you're going to find me.
Oh, I'll be up there too. So don't worry about that.
It's going to be a good time. Hey, let's talking about maybe some of the hard goods, some of the stuff we are going to be bringing out onto the lake, not just the apparel, but you got anything else that you're eyeing up, which I know you do?
Well, I know for sure, I know we've talked about it 100 times on the show is, live imaging sonar and the new Garmin transducer. I know I haven't been able to get my hands on one yet. I know maybe you have and have had a little experience with that, but that's one of the things on my to-do list to get in my hands and get out on the ice, because it really is one of those tools that has changed how I fish and, how I approach breaking down a body of water. So I'm really looking forward to that.
That is that the technology in that whole world is advancing so fast. It's really fun to be able to see what's happening and what's new. For me, I can't wait to get out and drill my first hole with the Ion Alpha. That is going to be a treat.
Yeah, I'm excited for that as well. Having seen and listened to the feedback from those guys that got to use it last year, it's, that was probably like 1A and 1B on my list of things that I'm looking forward to for new gear. So I'll give you that one for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. And I know the world has probably heard about the Ion Alpha, but if you haven't, you're going to want to check that out, because they took the best ice auger out there and made it better. Just when you think you can't do that, they did. They absolutely did. So that's going to be fun. There's a few new shacks in the lineup. I always think it's fun to look and find out what Eskimo is going to do for their new limited edition hub shack, right? Because a couple of years ago, they did the 949i. They did that in a plaid for an anniversary limited edition shack, and they had it out for 1 year. Last year, they did the 450 Outbreak in plaid. This year, it is the Quick Fish 3i in plaid, and that's going to be a fun one to fish out of this year. And it's always kind of fun just to see what they've got coming around next for those limited edition runs. Yeah,
everything that's plaid, I mean, it's Eskimo's brand. They always seem to amaze us with coming out with something different. And I know last year too, they had the Megs custom rods, and those were a hot item with the staff and with the customers. They went really fast, and hopefully those are back around this year. We haven't heard yes or no, and I'm hopeful that they'll have that partnership again. So I'm looking forward to those too.
Lots of exciting, fun stuff. And the part I like best about Shack Talk, Anthony, is the exciting and fun guests we get to have on. So what do we got in store for this year? What are we looking for season 7 of Shack Talk? If you're a follower, you know that we sometimes have a loose sort of framework that we work within. What are we going to be doing this year?
Yeah, so I don't want to give it all away, but we can probably cue in a few people into where we might be having some of those guests coming from. But we mentioned before we're going to do kind of a regional specific podcast where we want insight for a specific region, and we kind of broke it down by some of the different states or areas and some of the provinces in Canada as well. So we're going to have a mix of the US team members and some Canadian folks as well hopping on the podcast, talking about their area specifically, what lakes they like to target, what species they target, and maybe even time of year if you're planning a trip to one of those destinations. I know that plays a factor in when a lot of people plan those trips. There's some areas like Ontario, Manitoba that get that really early ice, or maybe even that super late ice where we can take advantage of those destinations. And, we'll talk about Wisconsin, South Dakota, some of those areas get maybe ice in the middle of the season. That's good. And, it's maybe a little sketchy on the front end and back end of that. So it'll be interesting to hear from our guests what their feedback is and what they like to do, and, help the listener maybe plan a trip to one of those destinations if that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, plan a trip. And another thing I think that I've learned in my time in ice fishing is that when you travel to different regions throughout the ice belt, there's different ways of fishing. There's different techniques. There's different things that people do. And that's that, regional identity. But you can take those little nuggets, those little pieces, and those little things and bring them back home. And a lot of times they work really, really well on our home waters.
Yeah, it's always a learning experience, especially when we have our guests on the podcast. I learn something every time. And like you mentioned, going to a different destination, fishing with different people, that's a lot of fun. And I really enjoy meeting new people out on the ice, whether it's an intended guest that we're fishing with or just talking with locals out on the ice as well. I think that's half the fun. You run into guys, and the ice fishing community is so welcoming and usually pretty social. And having that conversation, whether it's at the landing or out on the ice or maybe in a establishment after you get off the ice, having those conversations is a lot of fun, and you get to know people and, make some of those lifelong friends.
You are right. You are right. Lots of fun, lots of things to look forward to here in the upcoming season. Again, season 7 of Shack Talk. We're jumping off the number 1, episode 1 here with both myself and Anthony Kleinwachter. We're going to have guests for every other episode we've got lined up. You won't have to listen to just us the whole season long. We're as excited to get these guests on with us and learn from them as you are. So we'll be riding along with you, and we appreciate you riding along with us. Hey, here's one more thing, Anthony. We're going to start this tonight. Part of that sort of framework that we work within here at Shack Talk and that we have is that we get some themes woven in. And of course, conversations go where they go, but it's good to have a little bit of a framework to work within to get those conversations off the ground. We're going to do a little feature every one of our episodes this year. We're going to call it Ice Advice. And Ice Advice is really just a time to hear from you as our listeners and find out what your questions are. What do you want to hear from us? What do you want to get from our opinions or our experience or our knowledge, or, and we'll just use that to have a little bit of conversation and banter. And I think it's going to be pretty cool. We will set up definitely a venue for you to get those questions as listeners to us. This was kind of we'll be 100% honest. We just kind of brainstormed this idea the other day and really liked it. And so we're going to use it. We've got a few questions for tonight. We threw out a few, went out and threw out a few feelers, and we've got a few questions that we're going to use here, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it'll be a fun segment. And I know, as you mentioned, it's something we kind of put together that I think will be really fun. It'll be fun not only to get your opinion and my opinion, but our guests' opinion. We're going to bounce these questions off of them, and hopefully they'll have some great insight, because I know we've got a lot of great guests with a lot of great knowledge. It'll be fun to pick their brain on maybe some of these questions that come in from the listeners. And as Kyle, as you mentioned too, for those listening that want to get us those questions, I mean, whether you're reaching out to Kyle or myself individually, or the Eskimo Facebook or Instagram pages, shoot us a DM, or comment on the Shack Talk posts out on Facebook. I know those get uploaded as well. we'll find those questions. So definitely share them with us. We've had questions and feedback in the past, and it's great hearing from the listeners. We'd love to do live call-ins, but this isn't one of those live radio shows.
No. And but we're doing the next best thing, right? We're doing the next best thing. Hey, let's take a look at what we've got for some questions. And the first one, Anthony, you kind of thought this might be a recurring question we can use during the season. And I really like that idea. The question came, well, if we take a step back, there's a little story behind the question. We were all not too long ago, we were all out in Cumberland, Wisconsin, right? Artisan World Headquarters, Eskimo Ion, and all of their brands. And it was an opportunity for all of us as team members to, collaborate, to share some ideas, share some knowledge, and it was a whole lot of fun. Well, we got to talking, right? We got to talking one night at dinner. And of course, there's some of us who have not had the opportunity. Well, we've had the opportunity. We haven't capitalized on the opportunity. We've not ever landed a 30-inch walleye. So the topic of 30-inch walleyes got started, right? And Anthony, you've gotten a 30.
Yeah, I've gotten one. It was one of those ones that just cleared the line, so I'm counting it. It wasn't a no doubter, but it was definitely right there at the 30 line.
Well, you earned your badge, right?
Yes, I did.
I'm
in the club, or out of the club, some may say. Well,
that's for the conversation. I've caught. I don't even know how many I could count. How many between 29 and 7/8, right? But I've never legitimately had one touch the line, so I'm not going to claim that because it hasn't happened yet. Now we got to talk, and I'm not alone. And so Randon Olson was one of these folks who had not. Mike Toole, and there was a group of guys there that had not caught a 30-inch walleye. So on the way back to Fargo, you and I, Randon, were driving together, Andrew Shea, and we came up with the idea of starting a Facebook group with the sole purpose of having everybody who's in that group who's a member get kicked out. And the way you get kicked out is you catch a 30-inch walleye. So if you're listening to Shack Talk and you are on social media, if you're on Facebook, go look for the Undirty 30 Club. And it's all in good fun. It's all in good fun. We're showing pictures of all of the walleyes that didn't go 30. And so we're using that hashtag didn't go 30. And it's a whole lot of fun. We're going to celebrate when people get kicked out. But one of the questions that was asked, Randon, he asked this question. Now we're getting back to where we were originally intending to go with this, Anthony. And so the question is, which is more difficult to catch? A 50-inch muskie, a 30-inch walleye, 15-inch perch, 15-inch crappie, 11-inch bluegill, or name any others that you want to as well, right? But I think those are maybe the big ones that come to our mind when you first get started. Give me your take on that, Anthony. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm probably leaning more to the panfish side of things. That 15-inch perch, 15-inch crappie, 11-inch bluegill. I know there's lakes that have those caliber fish in them, but it seems like, 50-inch muskie, 30-inch walleye, 40-inch pike, kind of some of those destination lakes where those fish are possible. They're not, not a given, definitely, but Lake Winnipeg, Lake of the Woods, some of those places, your chances of catching one of those larger predator fish, I think, is a lot higher. Whereas catching one of those top end panfish, crappie, bluegill, perch, you really have to put in the time, I think, and effort and know where to target those fish. Don't get me wrong. There's probably lakes that have those fish loaded, and there's probably listeners that have like, oh, I've caught multiple of those fish. Well, I certainly haven't. So I think for me, I'm leaning more towards the panfish side of things, that those are harder to catch than, maybe some of those big predator fish. What do you think?
Well, let me ask you this. Before I answer, how many of these have you checked off your list?
So I have a 15-inch crappie, a 15-inch perch, a 30-inch walleye, and a 40-inch pike. So I've never caught a 50-inch muskie or an 11-inch plus bluegill. So got a couple more to cross off the list.
40-inch pike. Hey, there was one I didn't have on the list. So yeah, that one's got to be added in there as well. Yeah, good. You've got a great start, right? But you still got things you're chasing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just talking about some of the lakes that we fish, I think where you fish maybe even raises that bar a little bit more. I fish Lake of the Woods, a 40-inch pike up there, from what you've even seen and experienced in the one trip up there, that's a weekend occasion for most groups that go up there. It seems like somebody in the group is bound to, or, going to catch one at that 40-inch mark, whether it's, just under or right around that area. So I think raising that bar even on some of those lakes, and, for the muskie guys, I know 50 inches was always the bar. Well, it seems like some of those muskie gurus now, it's 52 or 54 or 55 even. So that bar continues to move and change based on how and where you fish. And maybe there's guys that fish for crappies and bluegills that have that 11 and they're looking for a 12-inch bluegill, or the 15-inch crappie, they're looking for that elusive 16-inch. So it's really fun to go back and forth. I know it's been a running conversation in our groups on those trophy caliber fish, and when somebody gets one, it is pretty special.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Absolutely. My take on it, Anthony, is well, for me personally, it's the 30-inch walleye that's the hardest, because that's the one the top of the want list, not just what I've caught, but the top of the want list that I haven't gotten. And what's interesting about it is I think it's like so many things in the outdoors. It's really tough to do until it isn't, right? Like, I'm thinking of Mike Olson. I'm thinking of Scott Brewer. I'm thinking of some of these guys that, once they finally got their 30-inch walleye, it fell like dominoes, right? They caught more of them. It was then it wasn't such this elusive, far off goal. And you're right. It's where you fish. I think that plays a big part in it. But I think that 30-inch walleye is right up there. I also am with you on the panfish, specifically bluegills. And I think with bluegills, that's a big one. They're a tough one. You can catch a lot of bluegills, but to catch one that's really quality. And you mentioned the bar raising with muskies, right? Well, muskie fishing and for muskie anglers, it's more than just expected. It's put into full practice, the whole catch and release. Randon, who guides muskies in the fall, he has one particular fish, and it's very distinguished, and it's easily distinguished. In the last 4 seasons, so in the last 3 years, he's caught that same fish 15 times.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how the catch and release practice can work with some of those big fish. And I think, panfish are no different. We just don't see those in repetition on, being able to identify those fish. But I think protecting and being mindful of, releasing those trophy caliber fish, replicas these days are just as good as a skin mount. And, I know a lot of people would prefer that skin mount, and no fault to anyone for keeping the fish of a lifetime that you catch. But being able to release some of those higher end caliber fish really just puts those fish back, and somebody else is going to catch it, get a picture of it when it's bigger. And, maybe you'll come back and catch that same fish.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you, Anthony. And for me, we know I've not caught a 30-inch walleye. I have caught a 50.5 and a 51.5-inch muskie, both, by the way, on 8-pound test line and a 3/8 ounce jig and a fathead. So we've got that one for a notch in the belt. As a kid, I caught a 16 3/4-inch crappie. Amazing. All I have is a little Polaroid picture of it. We caught it in the Minnesota River, brought it home, and ate it. And that right there just tells you the shift in mindset in the generation since I was a little kid, right? That was perfectly acceptable at that point in time. And then not too many years ago, I was able to put on the ice a bluegill that went 12 1/8. And that's probably one of my biggest moments or biggest fish that I'm most proud of, to be able to catch a fish of that caliber. It exceeded 2 pounds legitimately on a postage scale, and a replica of the crappie is right here off camera, and so is that 12 1/8-inch bluegill. Those are pretty big ones for me, but still chasing the perch. Not caught a perch really any bigger than about 13 3/4. And so 15 would be a big jump there, and certainly the 40-inch pike and the 30-inch walleye. So this is going to be a fun discussion. I'm looking forward to this one. And I think having this being a recurring question for ice advice is definitely something that's going to be a lot of fun this year, Anthony.
Yeah, it'll be a great topic. I think it'll be fun to get our guests' take and see what kind of fish they've caught over the years. I know that's a lot of fun having those conversations and, where maybe the person's going next to target those fish.
Yeah, for sure. And here's another question. So we've got a question from Matt in Duluth, and it says, "Hi guys, this season I upgraded my hub shack to an Eskimo Outbreak 650 XD, which is a fantastic shack, by the way. 5 sides, the big door, no trip door. Usually fishes with 3 to 4 people. So that's what we're looking at for a scenario here." And he says, "We often debate about what the ideal hole layout is. Okay, so where do you position the holes within the hub shelter? Tried putting holes in the corners, it works, but we're far apart and we're congested in the middle. We've also tried drilling holes in a line in the middle or through the middle of the shack, but it doesn't seem like that's the most efficient use of the fishing space." So maybe, and he goes on to say, "What's your thought on how you arrange your holes? Or maybe I'm just overthinking it and it feels like maybe it isn't that big of a deal."
Well, I can maybe add to that because I've probably tried every layout possible in a hub shack, whether it's all the holes in the corners, fishing around the outside like a merry-go-round where everybody just has one hole, keeping your kind of middle open for whatever you have in the middle, and doing lines on both sides where you're all back to back. So I think I've fished with all of them. So maybe I'll ask you, what's your preferred go-to style, and do you think it's superior to the other?
Well, and everything's personal preference, right? I think that's one of the things. There's no right or wrong answer to some of these questions, but here's my thought on it. Ice camping is gotten to be a huge thing in the ice fishing world here the last couple of years. If you're ice camping, there's only certain arrangements you can do, right? And so I know Matt didn't ask that question as an ice camper. Yes, it is an ice angler, but I think that putting all of your holes in a line, that comes into play a lot of times when you're ice camping, because you've got to have a significant amount of space for a cot or a heating system or whatever it is you have there. So I see where that can be the best option. And in those scenarios, I've done the spokes of the wheel where you're all sitting back to back. And I do agree. You're not looking at each other. You're kind of, faced off into your own little world there. And so I probably don't like that as much as I like what you described as the merry-go-round, right? So each panel or 2 panels of the shack, you get one guy and he's kind of facing forward and you go around in a circle. We did that last year when we were out Tullabee fishing, and we had a couple other guys in the shack with us, Anthony, and that seemed to work really well. I guess that would be my go-to.
Yeah, I think that one's probably the best way to still feel like you're part of the group and not, like you said, be back to back and not seeing anybody. But you're maybe only fishing one hole. So if you're really set on fishing 2 holes, I still think back to back in the middle, everybody's got their 2 holes on the outside, is probably the easiest way to go if that's really what you want, is being able to fish 2 different holes. So that would be kind of my thing in it. And I think you touched on it a little bit too, where you have your heater. Keep that in mind when you're fishing with a group who gets cold, because you put them in the back next to the heater, and then whoever's the hottest, you keep them by the door so they're getting that breeze and cooling off every time somebody goes in and out of the shack, because that can make the day too. If you're all comfortable, you got the people that are coldest by the heater and the people that are maybe a little more warm-blooded by the door.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. Staying warm, staying comfortable is always a big part of it. And of course, inevitably, when you're in a shack like that, at some point during the day, you get a pike come through and they grab your line and wrap all of them together. And that's always fun. That's a story for another day. But yep, that's always a good one. But we appreciate the questions. And that's going to be a really fun part of our podcast this year. Again, if you're listening to Shack Talk here, send us your questions. Send us what you want to hear us talk about. Questions, scenarios like this. And we'd love to hear from you. There's a good chance we'll get it out on the air and have some discussion about it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to those questions. I'm looking forward to the season coming up. I'm looking forward to the guests. And honestly, I'm looking forward to the temps outside dropping a little bit and, starting to skim across those little ponds and sloughs and got a little bit of deer hunting to do first. I think hopefully most of our listeners do as well. And we want to wish them luck because I know that's coming right around the corner. But really looking forward for the upcoming season and the opportunity to sit on here and talk with Kyle every other week and put the podcast out and share some of the knowledge that we have and the guests have with all the guests that and all the listeners that we have on the show. It'll be a really fun season. So make sure to stick with us for the entire season. If you haven't, go back, listen to the prior seasons. There's a lot of great episodes, as we mentioned at the beginning. Thanks to Eskimo, we give them a lot of credit for letting us be on this platform and talk to everyone and share some of our nonsensical advice with everyone. Hopefully you get to learn a thing or two, and we look forward to getting you guys back on the show in the coming weeks as we get these episodes rolling out for the season. So until then, get out on the ice, have some fun, and we'll see you next time.